Winter in upstate New York is no joke. Living just outside Buffalo, I was used to heavy snowfall, freezing temperatures, and the kind of storms that could shut down an entire city. But nothing, not the snow, not the cold, has ever made me feel truly afraid. Until that night. It was my senior year of high school, sometime in January, when my parents told me they'd be leaving for a few days. My dad, a high-level executive, traveled constantly, and this time my mom was going with him on a business trip to Texas. It wasn't unusual for me to be home alone, and I didn't mind. At least, that's what I told myself. The day after they left, the weather report started getting intense. A massive snowstorm was heading our way. Snow wasn't exactly a big deal around here, but the way the weatherman talked about this one made me nervous. It was Friday, and if the storm was as bad as I said, I'd be snowed in all weekend. Not wanting to be alone, I called my best friends, Liz and Alexa, and asked if they wanted to come over. Within an hour, they arrived at my house, their arms full of snacks and blankets, excited for a lazy weekend of movies and gossip. By Saturday afternoon, the storm hit full force. The snow came down in thick sheets, covering the roads in minutes. By evening, I guessed over a foot had fallen in just a couple of hours. It was dark, and we were officially snowed in. Not that it mattered. We had food, warmth, and a generator in case we lost power. Settling in for a movie, we curled up in the living room, the fire crackling in the fireplace. Outside, the wind howled against the house, rattling the windows. Then came the knock. At first, we weren't sure if we'd imagined it. The storm was loud, but there it was again, a steady, deliberate knock at the front door. We exchanged nervous glances. Alexa asked who it could possibly be. My stomach twisted. No one should have been there. Not in this weather. Liz suggested maybe my parents had come home early, but I knew they would have called. Carefully, I walked to the front window, trying to peer outside, but the snow was coming down too hard. Another knock. My pulse quickened. Alexa asked if we should answer it. I hesitated. Then, swallowing my nerves, I unlocked the door but left the screen door latched. Slowly, I opened it. A man stood there. He was dressed in jeans and a coat, but the coat was far too thin for this kind of cold. Snow clung to him and he shivered violently. His face was pale, lips slightly blue. He seemed really relieved when I opened the door. He said he needed help. I hesitated, glancing at Liz and Alexa. He continued on saying that he had lost control of his car. He said he was driving through town and the storm hit. He slid off the road and this was the first house he had seen. My chest tightened. His story made sense, but something felt off. He said he just needed somewhere to warm up and call for help. I wanted to help him, I really did, but a deep primal instinct told me to keep the door shut. I told him I was sorry, but my parents weren't home and I couldn't let anyone in. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. The man's expression shifted. His eyes, desperate a moment ago, went cold. The shivering stopped. He just stared at me. A long, heavy silence filled the space between us. Liz reached forward and shut the door. We locked it and stepped back, hearts pounding. We went back into the living room, talking about how creepy the whole situation was. It wasn't but a few minutes later, the power went out. The room plunged into darkness. Liz started crying, saying that man must have cut the power. I shook my head and told her it was probably just the storm and not to worry. But deep down, I wasn't sure. We waited, expecting the generator to kick in. A minute passed, then another. Nothing. Then, Alexa screamed. She pointed at the sliding glass door leading to the back patio. He was there. The man stood outside, staring in. His face was pressed against the glass, fogging up the window. And in his hand, a hammer. He grinned, then he swung the hammer against the glass door. The first hit cracked the glass. The second sent a jagged fissure across it. We screamed and bolted upstairs, running into my bedroom and locking the door. Alexa fumbled for her phone, dialing 911. I heard the police say they were on their way, but it would take time to get there. I knew we didn't have that time. Then, a thought hit me. I grabbed my phone and with my shaking hands dialed another number. My neighbor, John. My dad always told me if I ever needed anything, call him. He answered on the second ring. I frantically explained the situation to him. John told us to stay put and he would be right there. However, when I hung up the phone, that's when I heard it. Or didn't hear it, I should say. The pounding had stopped. Silence. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. Nothing. I looked back at Alexa and Liz. I whispered that I thought he was gone. Then, a deafening crash. The man was trying to break down my bedroom door. I ran next to Alexa and Liz. We all huddled together, crying. Then, a voice boomed from downstairs. The pounding on the door stopped. I heard the yell again. It was John. Then, a gunshot rang through the silence. There was another loud crash and the sound of a window breaking. Moments later, John came pounding on the door, telling us it was safe to come out. I ran out to John, hugging him, tears streaming down my face. The police arrived minutes later. Apparently, when John came into the house, he fired his shotgun into the floor, hoping to scare the intruder. Luckily for us, John's plan worked. The man jumped out of the window and ran off. The police followed the footprints and blood trail back to the road where they found tire tracks. The man had escaped. To this day, I have no idea who he was. I never saw him again. But every winter, when the snow starts falling, I remember his face. There's something about winter hiking that makes me feel alive. The crisp air, the crunch of snow beneath my boots, and the way the world feels untouched and endless. It's like nothing else. I've hiked all over, but a month ago, I decided to challenge myself with a solo trip through Mount Rainier National Park. At first, it was everything I hoped for. The trails were perfect, the skiing was thrilling, and the solitude was exactly what I needed. But then the storm hit. I knew bad weather was possible, but this was something else. The wind howled through the trees, sending flurries of snow in every direction. I tried setting up my tent, but the wind tore at it like an angry beast, snapping poles and burying me in snow before I could even zip it shut. By the time I managed to get inside, I was soaked to the bone, shivering so hard my teeth ached. It was a miserable night, but I told myself it would pass. It didn't. By morning, the storm had only worsened. The snow kept falling, thick and relentless, and I had realized I was in serious trouble. I needed to find real shelter, somewhere warm, somewhere safe, before I froze to death. I packed up and pushed forward, praying I'd come across something. For hours I slogged through knee-deep snow, my fingers numb inside my gloves, my breath coming out in ragged gasp. And then, like a miracle, I found it. A hiker's cabin. These small shelters were scattered throughout the park, meant for hikers in emergencies. I practically ran to the door, throwing it open and stepping inside before slamming it shut against the wind. The cabin was pitch black. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on. The cabin was small, just a table, a counter for preparing food, and a ladder leading to the loft above. It was exactly what I needed. I stripped off my wet clothes, replaced them with some dry ones, and got a fire going in the stone fireplace. The warmth was immediate, a blissful contrast to the frozen hell outside. I ate a quick meal, stretched my aching limbs, and climbed the ladder to the loft. As soon as I crawled into my sleeping bag, exhaustion took over. I don't know how long I was asleep before something woke me up. A sound. It was faint, almost like movement. A soft shuffle just below me. My heart pounded as I reached for my flashlight. I called out asking who was there, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. I clicked the light on and swept it over the cabin. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows along the wooden walls. But there was no one there. I exhaled, shaking my head, probably just the wind outside. I settled back into my sleeping bag. Then I heard something else, a creaking sound. My eyes shot open. That was not the wind. It was a footstep on the ladder. My breath hitched as I strained to listen. Another step. Something was climbing up the ladder. I couldn't see anything. The loft was pitch black. My flashlight, where was it? My hands fumbled, searching for it in the folds of my sleeping bag. Then I heard another step, higher up the ladder. I clenched my jaw to keep quiet. How many ladder steps were there? I couldn't remember. The ladder wasn't tall. Whoever, whatever, was climbing it had to be almost at the top. Then I heard another step. My fingers finally found the flashlight. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I didn't want to turn it on. Every instinct screamed at me not to look, but I had to. With a deep breath, I flicked the switch and screamed. Peering over the edge of the loft was a head, blackened, charred, flesh melted like wax. Its hollow, empty eyes locked onto mine. 2 burned, skeletal hands gripped the ledge of the loft, holding it up on the ladder. It stared at me for a moment, its expression unreadable. Then it let go. It's like it just vanished. No thud, no sound of it hitting the floor, just gone. I scrambled back against the loft wall. I sat there, flashlight shaking in my grip, staring down at the ladder. I didn't move for an hour. Finally, I forced myself to crawl forward. Peering over the ledge, I shined the light down. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of movement. The door was still shut, but I knew it had been there. I just knew it. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my gear, shoved it into my pack, and I was out of that cabin in record time. I didn't care that it was still dark. I didn't care that the storm hadn't let up. I hiked through the night, pushing my body beyond exhaustion, until finally, I made it back to my car. I don't know what I saw in that cabin. A ghost? A hallucination? Some kind of thing that shouldn't exist? I'll never know. But one thing I do know for certain, I will never go winter hiking again. I never minded winter driving. Growing up in Maine, I was used to navigating through snow-covered roads and icy highways. But that night was different. I was on my way to visit my parents at their winter cabin, deep in the woods of northern Maine. While most people flocked to Florida for the winter, my folks preferred isolation, snowstorms, and the sound of wind howling through the trees. It had been a while since I'd seen them, and with some time off work, I figured a visit was overdue. The drive started off fine. The roads were clear, traffic was light, and my truck, a sturdy 4x4, handled well. But as I got deeper into the rural parts of Maine, the snowfall thickened. At first, I figured I could push through. My truck could handle it. Then, the real storm hit. The snow came down in thick, blinding sheets, reducing my visibility to just a few feet in front of me. The road, barely plowed, was becoming impossible to see. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tightly, my knuckles white. Then, I heard a loud bang. The truck jolted violently. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering. Had I hit something? A deer? A person? Grabbing my flashlight, I jumped out into the bitter cold. The wind cut through me like a knife, and the snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked around to the front of the truck. There was a dent, a big one, and worse, blood. My stomach churned. My flashlight beam danced across the snow, searching. No body, no carcass. However, I did see tracks moving away from my truck and into the woods. I couldn't tell what had made them, but it was snowing so hard that they were almost completely covered. I squinted, trying to see through the dense snowfall. Whatever I hit, it was gone. And then I heard it. A shriek. Not an animal, not a human. Something else. The sound sent ice through my veins. It was deep and primal, vibrating through the cold air like it belonged to something that had no business existing. I wasn't sticking around to find out. I sprinted back to my truck, jumped inside, and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking as I threw it into drive and took off. I was going too fast for the conditions, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of there. Then, there was another loud bang on my truck. The truck lurched to the side. This time, I hadn't hit something. Something had hit me. Then, before I could process what was going on, another loud bang hit the side of my truck, making me almost lose control. I clenched my teeth and floored the gas. My tires spun out. I wasn't moving. It was as if something was holding onto my truck. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw it. A massive bipedal thing stood behind my truck. It had to be at least 12 feet tall, covered in thick matted fur, its muscles rippling beneath. Its face was almost human, but not quite. Jagged teeth jutted from its mouth, its breath steaming in freezing air. And its hands, they were huge, clawed hands. They were gripping my truck, holding it into place. I screamed and slammed the gas. For a moment, the truck didn't move. Then, with a sudden jolt, my tires found traction. The truck ripped free from its grip, and I sped off into the storm, not looking back. I didn't stop until I reached a small town about 20 miles away. My hands were still shaking as I pulled into a motel parking lot. I got out and checked my truck. 2 massive dents in the side, like fist had slammed into it. I walked to the back and stopped cold. My tailgate was down. There were smaller dents in the metal, like something had dug its fingers into it. I didn't sleep that night. To this day, I've never told anyone what happened, because who would believe me? Who would believe that Bigfoot tried to get revenge on me for hitting it with my truck?